Stefan Pierer's shocking announcement came in response to a question regarding KTM's return to MotoGP in 2016. Here's the reason for returning to MotoGP. We'd like to produce a successor to the existing RC8 V-twin, in which case, let's do the following. We'll stick to making a superbike, but only for closed course usage, so it won't be homologated for sale as a street bike. Now, just to make sure he was hearing things correctly, Cathcart pressed the KTM CEO and asked if there would at least be a homologated version of this machine. In answer, Pierer again said no, because we at KTM think that a sport bike with such performance doesn't have a place on the public roads. Yeah, okay, apparently this doesn't have that much performance. This is suitable for public roads. Yeah, it's the KTM Super Duke, baby. Here we go. We're about to have a very, very fun day. There's so much to talk about. I don't care though. I want to go ride. So twisty time, baby. Let's go have some fun.
Now let's justify that clickbait thumbnail just a little bit so that I can make sure I don't piss too many people off by telling a story. My first experience with a Super Duke actually made me treat every other KTM that I've ridden with kid gloves. I don't ride KTMs like I ride most other motorcycles, just because of the one experience I've had on a Super Duke. So we were gonna shoot a video, me and Yami, and we borrowed my buddy's Super Duke. It was the 2014 that appeared on the channel a couple of times. And, you know, I'd ridden a couple of fast bikes, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling good. We pulled out of the shop, and I pulled away in like first or second gear in sport mode. Without even feeling the bike come up, I'm suddenly looking at the sky. It lifted the front wheel up so far, it genuinely scared me. And, you know, my feet came off the pegs. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. And that was the only experience on any fast motorcycle that I've had where I was like, oh my God, I am a squishy meat thing on a vehicle that does not care if I live or die. What am I doing? And that is the point where that has been burned in my brain and has forever caused me to be very, very cautious around KTMs. And you might see it today in the way that I ride this bike. I still treat this machine with kid gloves because it scared me. It's the first motorcycle that genuinely scared the shit out of me. But now that I have a few years under my belt, I can look at the KTM a little bit more holistically and be a little bit less terrified of it. I still treat this with great respect, but we can still have a little bit of fun with it, can't we? Yes, we can. So, what's the first thing you notice about the KTM? Well, honestly, if you start it in street mode, you're gonna be a little bit underwhelmed, I think, honestly. It's nice that it has street mode, but I don't think it's really necessary for this motorcycle, to be perfectly honest. Despite its reputation as being a savage wheelie monster, in sport mode, it's honestly very rideable. It's fast, don't get me wrong, and you need to treat it with a lot of respect. But I don't think it's really gonna surprise you. To be perfectly honest, I think what I ended up doing because of my first experience on a Super Duke is I put it on this pedestal of, okay, yeah, the Super Duke is the pinnacle of hyper naked motorcycles. It's so fast, it's so torquey, that I built it up in my brain, and now that I'm back on one, it's not that bad. It's really not. It's not for a beginner, and it's certainly not good as your first fast motorcycle. It requires some real delicate use of the throttle, and you can override this bike. Well, you can't override the motorcycle. You can override your skills very, very quickly on this thing and get yourself into a lot of trouble. It's not for everybody, but it's a very, very, very nice package. The way it's suspended and the way it makes its power is really, really great for just fun, twisty road riding, and it's definitely capable of absolutely tearing up a track day. This is a phenomenal package. And one thing I really love about it is how big it is. When you're just looking at it, it may not look particularly sizable, but when you sit on it, it's a very, very roomy package. The pegs are really low, the handlebar is really wide, and the tank is really high. It's perfect for a tall guy, and you're going to hear me say that a handful of times in this review. One thing that is interesting is no quick shifter on this motorcycle. I would have sworn by 2018 they would have put a quick shifter on here, but I guess not. To be honest, I kind of like not having a quick shifter. It's really fun. I can't remember the last time I was on a Hyper Naked that didn't have one, and it's cool. It definitely makes it more engaging to ride. You know, you don't really need the clutch. You can just go clutchless because the transmission on this is phenomenal. But it's still enjoyable. You know, it makes it more engaging. But I will say, the technology on this bike is basically right in the sweet spot. You're going to notice it if you're acting stupid, but otherwise, you're really not going to feel it. And personally, that's how I like it. I notice every now and again when I'm getting on the gas, and I can feel the motorcycle wanting to wheelie, but it's not. That's really where I feel the intervention. Like right there, I know the bike was trying to wheelie on me. I came on just a little bit strong, and the bike wanted to lift the front tire. I could tell, but it just didn't. It kept the wheel down, and I kind of appreciate that because this thing is effortless to wheelie if you want it to be. I think one of the spooky things about this motorcycle on a twisty road, to kind of wrap up my thoughts here, is just how easy it is to ride. KTM worked some magic to turn this absolute animal of a motor into a package that's easy to ride and that's fun to ride, because sometimes having a ton of power can be terrifying. The brakes work really well, the technology works really well, and generally it's an eminently rideable package. You know, it's spooky. maybe it's appropriate that this thing's coming out right around Halloween. Let's pull this thing over and talk about the specs on this bike, as well as some of my pros and cons, because as much as I enjoy this thing, it ain't a perfect motorcycle.
Diving on into the specs on this thing, in case you didn't already know, it's packing the 1301cc V-twin. Usually say 1302, but that's because, you know, what's 1cc here or there. But anyway, 1301 cc's, one of the biggest motors in the business when it comes to sport bikes. And it's getting even bigger for 24. They're actually taking it up to 1400 cc's because it's just not big enough. This thing's putting down 177 horsepower and 104 foot-pounds of torque, which is a biblical amount of power. Now, this motorcycle is kind of heavy, actually. 460-ish wet and ready to ride. There's a lot of stuff in this motorcycle, despite how clean a lot of the looks are. Now, mounting up on this motorcycle, it has a 33-inch seat height, 32.9 to be exact, and it's tall. If you're a short rider, it's not gonna work for you. I'm sorry. There's just no getting around it. The seat is narrow, and so is the tank between the knees, but you can see I barely have a bend in my knee, and I'm 6'2", closer to 6'3" in my boots, and I still have to work to reach the ground on this. Any taller, and I'd be like lifting my heel up. This is the larger gentleman's superbike. There's great clearance at the pegs, whether you're riding duckfoot style or sport bike boy, and the reach of the bars is super comfy. The seat's wide and flat, and as you're gonna see in the highway, this is a great place to sit. Now let's talk about some pros and cons on this thing. So the first obvious con for a lot of people, the styling. Personally, I think that this bike is butt ugly. I think it's terribly ugly, but it's like sriracha in that way. It burns your eyes, but after a while, it burns so good. It's unmistakably a KTM. And honestly, the more I look at it, the more it grows on me. I actually really enjoy how ugly this motorcycle is. I also do need to shout out the fact that on this motorcycle, despite having so much power, it's a very, very usable bike. It doesn't feel like it's gonna absolutely rip your arms off unless you want it to, in which case not only will it tear your arms off, but it will beat you to death with them. Now, my personal experience with the Super Duke platform comes from the 2014 model, and the 2014 model had a much better dashboard. I'm just gonna say that. I don't like the TFT on this thing. It's too small. I don't like the layout. I would just prefer the big sweeping analog tack and the big number that says how fast I'm going. This, I don't like it. I also really, really don't like how you have to push the key on button, then let it wake up, and then you can start it. Just let me put the key in the ignition, KTM. These stupid key fobs, they need to go away. I hate this. I absolutely hate this. But beyond that, there's really not that much to hate on this motorcycle. It's phenomenal. It is so good. And this guy right here is 11 grand at AF1. That is an outrageous amount of bike for the dollar. I'd buy it. I would seriously buy it. But before we get there, let's take this thing out on the highway and see what it's like doing some highway pulls, because I mean, if you're gonna get a Super Duke, you're 100% gonna be doing highway pulls. So let's go break some rules.
Whee! Oh man, that's only street mode, guys. That's only street mode. Okay, so the Super Duke upon the highway. What is it like? Well, this thing is a very unique riding experience when you're on the highway. It's like a supermoto that has the front end of a naked bike. I don't know what is happening over at KTM headquarters, but these Dukes are so narrow between the knees. They're absolutely insane. It feels like my knees are basically touching. And the seat is really flat and it's really hard, but it's actually really comfortable. Oh yeah! That's the Super Duke! Yeah. It's insane how much different street and sport modes are on this machine. Oh man. But because it rides like a supermoto, you actually get really clear air around your head. All of this is very low and very flat. So your head is totally clear. You are getting some nasty air around your chest, but it's so easy to just cruise with this thing, just because of how clean the air is around my helmet. Now, I will say that in terms of ergonomics on this thing, on the highway, it's one of the most comfortable superbikes ever, especially for somebody like me who's pretty darn tall. I would classify the Super Duke as the tall person's superbike. You basically cannot get a more comfortable superbike for somebody who's above 6 foot. And I know somebody out there is going to be like, well, you know, it's only got 108 foot-pounds of torque. Is that enough to pass people? I don't know, is it? One thing I do appreciate about this later model Duke is it actually has cruise control. So The nice thing is that it's there. I just don't like that it's mimicking the Aprilia style cruise control. I don't like having to pull it out to the side and then down. I prefer a button to turn it on and then a button to set. I don't like having like a 360 joystick situation, but it's easy to use. And then of course it does have the roll to kill, which is good. I do appreciate having roll to kill on highway bikes. One thing that blows my mind with the Super Duke is how demure it can be. This thing is an animal. It's a savage beast. And yet, if you just want to be like, okay, we're just tootling along, it's so mellow. It's so mellow when it wants to be. Just kind of like middle to bottom of the RPM band. You've got an ass ton of torque, but it doesn't feel like it's going to absolutely rip your arms off. I really appreciate that, because one of the things that's intimidating about this motorcycle is how much torque it has and how instant it can be. Don't get me wrong, there is a ton of power on tap here, a biblical amount, but it honestly doesn't scare you, which is horrifying. It's nuts how rideable they made this motorcycle given how much power it has. And that's one of the things I love about this thing over the Tuono. And oh boy, it's so good. But that is the highway section under our belt. Let's pull this thing over and answer some Discord questions about the Super Duke, baby. I'm gonna keep doing some pulls on the way there though, because oh, it's so much fun. It's so much fun having that much torque.
All right, time for some Discord questions. If you would like to participate in this segment, all you gotta do is click the link down in the description below and join up on the Patreon. You'll get access to the Discord server, you'll get early access to videos, you'll get discounts on merch, all sorts of cool stuff, and weekly live streams. Let's dive on in with Gen Z Hyperweeb asking, can it wheelie? No, of course it can't. Full Metal Corgi, does it come in green? You're banned. Johnny Mish the Messiah, why would I get this over an XSR 900? So the reason why I like this over an XSR 900 is because A, it's a V-twin. I personally prefer the V-twin sound to the triple sound. Secondly, I very much prefer the seating position on this. I like the way that the XSR 900 sits. It's kind of supermoto-y. This is even better and it's way more comfortable for somebody my size. And then lastly, this thing you can get for 11 grand. If you can find Super Dukes for 11,000 bucks, why bother with an MT-09, honestly? Orange, after riding the Super Duke, how can any other naked bike ever compare? It's very difficult. Oh my God, it's so difficult. I think that this is like the king of naked bikes for me. Diabetes Man asking, is this bike safer because it's naked? Well, obviously, the CEO said so. Summit Coyote Outdoors asking, how many speeding tickets did you get on your test ride? And does it even know numbers below 100? Okay, seriously, as much as we joke about how stupid this motorcycle is, it can actually really be ridden responsibly, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Full Metal Corgi, can it be registered as a unicycle at the DMV? Yes, and honestly, it's really efficient when you think about it, because you never have to swap your front tire. You're only ever swapping rears, so by getting the KTM, you save money. It just makes sense. Frost. On a scale of 1 to you instantly loop this bike, how bad of an idea is it to go from a Duke 390 to the Super Duke? That's a horrible idea. You kidding me? You're gonna, the first time you crack the throttle open, you're gonna dump a load in your shorts and you're never gonna ride it again. Magic Toaster, does this leave you wanting to ride the Energica Ava Rebella instead? No, I'm sorry. Between the V-twin soundtrack and the fact that I can ride this all day, it trumps the Ava. However, the Ava is a very good motorcycle and has a lot of the same energy about it. It just doesn't have that sort of supermoto seating style. Dasco asking, do the Diavol S and the Monster 1200S of the same era make decent challengers to the KTM? Also, is this a used market bargain versus brand new model? So yeah, first of all, getting these used, as much as we make fun of KTM squids, the guys who own these tend to take really good care. This thing is pretty old and it's got a couple of cosmetic scuffs, and it's got one bad lever on it, but other than that, it's in amazing shape. And then as far as the Diavel S and the Monster S, the Monster's a lot closer than the Diavel is. They're decent enough. Honestly, this really does just stand on its own. The Laser Buddha asking, wheelie jokes aside, how well do the various traction functions mitigate the savagery? For example, if you maxed out all the safety settings, does it feel like a Z650 all of a sudden, or is it still a monster but on a tighter leash? That's a good question. I've been riding it mostly in sport mode. I started out in street and I was like, that's it, that's all it's got. I want a little bit more out of it, so sport mode. I don't know if I've felt any of the nannies kicking in. They're either that good or I'm just not riding it hard enough. If you were really pushing it, I'd reckon they probably start to feel a little bit more invasive, but average day-to-day riding, you're not gonna feel them. And again, honestly, it can be ridden normally if you can ride it normally. And that gives me a great segue into our final section. Let's go get my final thoughts on this bike and see whether or not I may have made a mistake purchasing my Grezzo.
All right, now putting my final thoughts together on the Super Duke, the best thing I can say about it is if you were to look up felony evasion in the dictionary, you're just going to get a picture of the Super Duke. It has that kind of energy, but because of the way it's packaged and the way that it is kind of just stock, if you don't want to be a rolling war crime, you don't have to be. It's so easy to ride. It's unbelievably simple to just get on and go, and the way that the modes restrict the motorcycle make it one of the easiest super bikes to ride out there, I think. It's also so unbelievably comfortable for somebody my size. Now that does mean it is quite restrictive if you're on the shorter side. If you're somebody who's, I would say if you're 5'10" or lower, you're going to be tippy toes in this motorcycle. Despite having a very narrow knee cutout here, you're not going to get away from how tall this seat is. I also think one of the beauties of this motor is how much time and effort KTM has put into refining the LC8 motor. It's flawless. Honestly, it's pretty much flawless. You're not gonna break it. I know a guy who's on a 1290 Adventure. I knew a guy who had a 14 1290 and did a ton of miles on it. These motors are bulletproof, and they make this much power this usably. It's absolutely insane. And then you let it go, and it will run away from you, but only if you ask it to. It's only going to get rowdy if you say, all right, it's time to get rowdy. It's kind of funny that I started this video with that quote from the CEO saying that it was irresponsible for them to make superbikes, and then I pointed to this thing being like, this is one of the most irresponsible motorcycles on the street. It's really, really not. It's very, very controlled. It's very calm. It's very deliberate, and it handles like a bike half its size. It's insane how well this thing goes around a corner. I tell you what, right now, I'm gonna say this, and this is gonna be my final thought here. Had I not just purchased the Grezzo at AF1, I would have bought this. As it stands, I need to own the Grezzo for at least a year. That's my rule, is I buy a motorcycle and I keep it for at least a year. I'm not getting rid of the Grezzo. I still love that bike. But how usable this Super Duke truly is astounded me, honestly. This is a bike you can just go have fun with. You can just ride it. It's insane. It's insane, dude. The biggest negative I've found with this motorcycle, honestly, this whole day, is the sound. Aww.
Maybe that isn't great either. But the sound, stock, this motor is so furious. It's just so choked up. I know there's more under the hood. You know, it's so smooth and so chill. It's almost too smooth and almost too chill. You need to do something wild with this thing. Do you need to go with the full Rottweiler kit? Probably not, but you should at least get yourself a slip-on and maybe a tune, because boy oh boy, this is a good bike. This is a very good bike. And if you wanted to check out this beast, click that link down in the description below. Check out the AF1 listing. I think it's is $11,000, which is an absolute steal for what you're getting. You're getting so much bike for 11 grand. I honestly, I am a little bit nervous to truly dig into the power, because there's just so much here. I will catch you guys in the next one. I'm gonna go ride this Super Duke around some more, because I'm having too much fun. I'm having way too much fun. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.